Hello guys, yet another video today in relation to the Charlie Gard case. This is the Christian Times, interesting source of information, but they got some interesting facts on here that's worth exploring. Charlie Gard's parents furious that government-appointed lawyer is tied to pro-euthanasia group. Now, the reason I've mentioned this is because before, when I was going through the minutes of the court procedures the other day, I start getting a bit confused about there seems to be another mother for the baby, and it turns out there is, and this is where this little controversy is here, or conflict of interest, as this publication has said, that there appears to be a group which is this Victoria Butler Cole, who speaks on behalf of the sick baby in court. Now that's quite mind-blowing, because you have mum and dad. This is again reinforcing the fact that mum and dad aren't there; they're being represented by their legals. But that this court that is set up in the family division of the High Court, obviously it has a judge who's competent in being a judge and knows the rules of family court. Of family court, guys. This is not like an ordinary trial by jury, common law kind of court. This is a lawful court, though. Don't think this is not a lawful court. It is a lawful court, but it's very specific rules relating to something called family division. Okay. So in the family division, you have the judge who's seated to like an umpire in a tennis match. Yeah, he knows the rules: 15, 30, 40, deuce, advantage, game. Yeah, so he knows the rules of the game, and the rules of the game have been laid out somewhere. I might do some researches into these rules later. But again, it all revolves around this thing called child and parents. So once you admit to having a child, then it becomes a set, and being a parent. Parent again being par, as in golf. You do an equal hole, like 3-shot hole. You do it in 3 shots. That's a par. And parent. It's an accusative, which I've already been through in a previous video. So when you're a defendant, you are accused. So therefore, defend. You're accused. Defend. Yeah. So in this case, you're accused of equality, or equal rights, or equal status, or equal ownership. So this is why that word is quite a tricky one to accept, and this is why you have two parents sitting in a courtroom. The dad is obviously starting to smell the stink of what's going on, because you're sitting there and you're not actually there. You have no control, you have no power, no one listens to you, and yet your little bundle of joy is being put up for all kinds of consequences. So obviously I've talked about the Great Ormond Street side being the prosecutor. Now Great Ormond Street brings the case. Okay, so again, the owners of Great Ormond Street get some legal representatives, whether they're in-house or out-of-house. They just instruct these people: we need this resolved. Could you represent our interest? These are our beliefs. Take them to court, and the legals who say, "Yep, got just a court for you. It's called family court." Boom, straight into family court. Who's the defending party? Defendants, parents. You being accused of equality. You being accused to defend yourself against this complaint. Bring them in. You're now in a legal setting, and now you've got legal representation, which means great, you can play. So in the example of tennis, the Great Ormond Street have appointed John McEnroe, and the parents of Charlie Gard have appointing, I don't know, Andre Agassi. Yeah, so the game's on. Yeah, but if the parents, excuse me, a little bit under the weather today. But if the parents didn't appoint an Andre Agassi, there's tricky. The game starts to freeze now. So it's like, so we're going to have these two Muppets, but that's going to be two Muppets against the guy McEnroe. So you're going to have mum and dad against the McEnroe. That doesn't make any sense. That's not an even fight. I can't allow that to go ahead. In the world of tennis, I'm just using that as an example because it's a tennis court. The idea of a tennis court being a court is because there are rules. And even in tennis, you get things: court violation, quiet please. There are rules, and if you disobey the rules, there are repercussions. So that's the thing. So you got Great Ormond Street sitting on the like the family side, like in Wimbledon. This is a good analogy. So in Wimbledon, you have those little ringside seats or courtside seats where the family, the camera's always on the family. So you got McEnroe, and the family would be like the Great Ormond Streets because McEnroe's representing his family's interest, which would be Great Ormond Street. And on the other side, you technically have a box where Chris and Connie are sitting. But essentially, until they appoint someone, they either have to do that themselves, which is like where you represent yourself. So, okay, we'll give you a tennis license to come in and be like a wild card entry. That's probably a good way of explaining it. So Connie or Chris Yates would get the wild card entry to go onto court and try and defeat McEnroe. Now, obviously, they haven't done that. They're sitting in the family box, and they've appointed a pro bono law firm, which, again, I won't go into because I've done that already. And they're up there. This is Andre Agassi. Yeah, I know all about legal. I'm competent. I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm just like, boom, I'm going to win. I've got a good chance of winning here. So there we are. We're playing tennis. Now, the funny thing about this court is the appointment of this Victoria Butler Cole, who speaks on behalf of the sick baby in court. So basically, the rules of this family court for the child, that pertaining of equal status for the state and parents, is that they've stuck Victoria Butler Cole in the family box at Wimbledon, watching Andre Agassi play. But essentially, she has, in some ways, an equal voice, if not a greater voice, than the actual flesh and blood mum and dad. That's just something I want to highlight. So you've got the judge, who's obviously a Crown employee. You've got the prosecution, who are a bunch of lawyers. You've got the defence, who are a bunch of lawyers. And you've got a government-backed, I think it would be classed as an NGO, from the Compassion in Dying and the sister organisation, Dying with Dignity. So you've got one of these people who are pro-choice, let's say, pro-choice about letting people live or die, sitting in the family box now watching Andre Agassi try and beat off McEnroe. So you can see how preposterous that is. I mean, if you don't see that as preposterous, then fair enough. But that's something I'm just interested in, that this Christian charity is obviously dug in from the euthanasia. This Christian newspaper article is obviously dug into the euthanasia side. And focus quite heavily on that, which is interesting because it was itching in my mind. Where's this extra voice come from? And it's now been highlighted by the Christian Times. Yeah, so there's a publicly funded state body, CAFCAS. Okay, so you've got a publicly funded. So the government, who pays for the NHS, who also takes in £50 million of charitable donations every year, has instructed a legal society to appoint a government judge. So you've got a government organisation, a government judge, and they have a government-funded NGO sitting in the family box. Yeah. So never mind the conflict of interest of someone who has the beliefs of assisted suicide or the right to choose how people die or should people die. Okay, that's irrelevant. The fact that you've got now you've got funded. There's a triangle now. You've got judge at the top, who's obviously employed by the Crown. You've got Great Ormond Street, who's funded by the Crown, NHS. And then you've also got on the right hand side, you've got people in the pocket of the government who basically are accepting finances from public purse, the taxpayer, and the government, which is obviously the Crown. All now in the triangle. So it's locked down. Quite interesting. Now, as to the judge, is he sitting up there in a private capacity or a public capacity? This is a question that's been thrown around a lot. Now, he's in a public building. He's in a public courthouse, family division of the High Court, opened by Her Majesty the Queen, no less. And yeah, so this is just an interesting kind of case, or an interesting kind of situation that you find, or the family find themselves in. And another thing that I just want to bring here is about Hirano. Hirano, who's the doctor from America who flew in, he studied the baby for one day, and he actually flew back on Tuesday night. So he's already gone back to America. So I was of the opinion perhaps he would stay and avoid the travel stress of Charlie Gard going to America. But clearly, if there is any hope for him, it's going to be Hirano's going to order the doctor's orders to take the child from Great Ormond Street and have him flown to the US for treatment. But that's kind of why you can see the frustration. I'm just highlighting why that frustration's happening from the parents' point of view. Is that they're sitting at the centre court at Wimbledon and essentially they're banging on a glass window and no one can hear them and no one can take notice of them. And that's kind of the nature of the court that they're in. And you might say, well, what can they do? Well, the only thing that they can do is change their status or inform the court of their status and have the court and bring their court to meet the Great Ormond Street case. Because you can't win if you're a defendant. You can't win if you're the top of the world, right? If you're the heavyweight boxer of the world, is the example that I've been given. Like if you're like Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, anyone like that. If you're the heavyweight champion of the world, you can't get any higher. You're the defendant. You've got to defend your title. So the only thing that Mike Tyson's going to do when he fights someone who's trying to beat him is that he's not going to win anything more. He's going to win the fight, but he's not going to get another belt for defending his belt. He's just going to retain it. He's got the right to retain it. So the only thing he can really do is kind of stalemate, which is why I beat you and now I'll keep my belt, or he can lose. In which case he's had a fight, he got paid, but by all means he's now lost his title and a new heavyweight champion arises who now is up to him. It's incumbent on him to defend his title. So that's why until they bring their case and make the Great Ormond Street a defendant in their case, or more importantly, the people who control Great Ormond Street, not the Great Ormond Street, who cares about that? It's the people who are pressing the buttons at Great Ormond Street need to answer in their court about what the hell they're up to in relation to this little baby. There we go. A little bit more food for thought.